LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the August 9th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. This weekend I have the 14 best, most newsworthy clips that I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CNN, CBS, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really informative, educational, fair use, media criticism, and political commentary show for you all tonight. I put a link down in the video description to my clip list of my 14 clips so you can read along on my notes and see if you can figure out what it was I was trying to say in my notes when I was working 8 to 10 hours all day to put this show together for you. Also, the source of all the clips is down in the video description. Tonight's topic is Country Club Trump. And there's like a whole different viewer here. Oh, sorry. I'm using a new YouTube interface this week, and it's a little bit strange. So the topic this week is Country Club Trump, because Trump is plummeting in the polls, due to his poor leadership during the COVID-19 crisis. And if you want evidence of that, here is the new NBC battleground map that they just put out this week. That shows Biden has, if the election were held today, which it unfortunately is not going to be, Biden has 334 electoral votes. You only need 270 to win. There's 79 toss-up, and including Texas. Texas is a toss-up, and then 125 electoral votes for Trump. So that's what I mean when I say Trump is plummeting in the polls because of his poor leadership during the COVID-19 crisis. And so now the supposed author of what the book that was actually ghostwritten, The Art of the Deal, was unable to get a deal with Congress this week to get relief to suffering Americans, but instead he interrupted his long weekend of golf to hold these two ersatz news conferences in front of his rich, out-of-touch country club members. I think at the Bedminster Club they have to pay an initial fee of $350,000, and then that's just to get into the club. Then there's the annual dues and other expenses. But anyway, so he appeared before all these rich guys, almost all guys, almost all white, where they were like cheering him. They were like his peanut gallery, and he talked about these bogus executive actions that he called executive orders. And then I'm going to show you clips from this morning's shows where both the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, eviscerated those executive actions as totally paltry, almost meaningless actions. And then Trump's minions come on the shows, Steve Mnuchin, Larry Kudlow, Peter Navarro, Robert O'Brien. None of them can defend Trump's actions, so that's what you have to look forward to. But first, I want to start with my political comedy clip. Actually, I have two clips. It's two looks at the Friday ersatz news conference I was talking about that Trump held in front of his rich, out-of-touch country club members. First, starting with the clip from Joy Reid's new show, the ReidOut, from Friday, where this is while they're waiting for the Trump news conference. Trump is talking to Eric Swalwell about this news story about how Trump's own national security, Director of National Intelligence, put out a report saying Russia is trying to interfere in our elections, but he made it seem better by adding in China and Iran. But I'll talk about that topic more when I get to my last news clip, clip number 14, if you're following along on the clip list where Nancy Pelosi talks about that issue. But actually, the reason I'm showing you this Joy Reid clip from the ReidOut is because in it you'll see how Trump's country club members start off with very few of them wearing masks, and then someone goes around handing out masks. And anyway, I will talk about all of that a little more after we watch this first clip from the Friday edition of the ReidOut, waiting for Trump's weird country club news conference over here.
To mind when I heard that they're talking not just about Russia, but about these other countries. Am I being too paranoid about that?
No, you're exactly right, Joy. There is only one country that has a preferred candidate that they are willing to actually help. And the assessment is that Russia is trying to help Donald Trump and to tear down Joe Biden. And for the Director of National Intelligence to conflate all of these threats, it would be like the weather forecast leading with a snowstorm in the Rockies and a lightning strike in the Midwest, and at the bottom of the hour saying, oh yeah, a Category 5 hurricane is going to hit the East Coast. They are truly trying to conflate threats, I believe, to protect the president. The president should, one, condemn what Russia is doing, two, devote every resource we have to stop them, and to work with Democrats and Republicans in the Congress to put tougher sanctions on Russia until they change their behavior.
And by the way, I just want to let the audience know that as you're listening to Congressman Swalwell, you're seeing on the other side of your screen there are the members. And I would love for Jonathan Lemire or one of the other reporters to turn around and ask some of these members how much they paid, how much it cost them to be members of the Trump Golf Club. There they are. Some of them have on masks, the wiser ones. Others do not. They're standing and festooned in the back in their cargo shorts and, you know, looking like they're having a grand old time. They're going to watch the president's speech. I don't know that you needed an audience to do a press conference like this. I want to keep you here, Congressman Swalwell, but I've got to get Maria for a moment, just a moment, Maria. I just want to hear your thoughts looking at this, please.
Well, you saw what just happened. Somebody walked out and started giving out masks because there were so many people who were not wearing masks. So he, I think, brought them out on a tray, those paper masks. And that's when people started putting them on. And now most of the people are wearing them. I was horrified to see a child, an unmasked child in that group. And it's just like, how could you expose a child to that? It's all very, very strange. It's also very, we can see it. It's very white. It's very much men. Now, I don't golf, Joy. I know that you and I have never had a meeting on a golf course, because I don't know how you and I would feel kind of hanging around in this particular golf course. I mean, I think we might stick out like a sore thumb. What do you think?
I think we would not fit in.
So that's kind of political comedy there. Joy Reid pointing out that she might not fit in at the Bedminster, New Jersey golf club, where Trump charges people $350,000 just to get into the club before they pay their dues and other expenses, according to the sources I saw. To answer Joy Reid's question, which I answered before I showed the clip, as to how much it actually costs. And you saw there, and Maria Hinojosa pointed out that there were kids there not wearing masks. They're all clustered together. They're not wearing masks. It's terrible leadership on the part of the President of the United States to show that image as something that, he owns the property there. He sets the rules, and he's President of the United States. That's what he's showing America is the way we should be behaving during this pandemic that has killed over 160,000 Americans, and where we have not been able to get it under control because of people not paying attention to masking and social distancing rules. And that's something that a reporter asked Trump about at that very news conference. And instead of taking responsibility and saying, yes, people should wear masks, they should engage in social distancing. No, of course not. He says, oh, they're here for engaging in political activity, because there's a New Jersey rule that the number of people in the gathering violated New Jersey COVID-19 crisis rules, where I think it's 10 or 25. I can't remember the number of people who are allowed to gather, but it violates that. But there's an exception for political activity, which Trump is right about. This is political activity, but then he makes a joke about it and calls it a peaceful protest, because the press is there and they're protesting against the fake news. And he refers to a previous question that I didn't show you, but Trump, he rarely smiles. Sometimes, and he'll smile for a few seconds sometimes. I've never seen a long, genuine smile from him, and certainly not a laugh. And he does make jokes, but they're always jokes at the expense of his political opponents or weaker people or people he wants to make fun of. And so that's the second political comedy clip, Trump's joke about peaceful protests, which I guess is at the expense of the post-George Floyd protests. But he's certainly not showing leadership. And, he's saying, yes, maybe it's not illegal what he's doing, But is it leadership? No, it's not leadership, as I will talk about with you a little more after we watch the last 90 seconds of Trump's press conference that followed the guy passing out the masks that I showed you last Friday. And I'll talk about it with you a little more after we watch together over here.
Thank you, Mr. President. You said that the pandemic is disappearing, but we lost 6,000 Americans this week. And just in this room, you have dozens of people. You're not following the guidelines in New Jersey, which say you should not have.
No, they don't have to. It's a political activity. You're wrong on that because it's a political activity. They have exceptions, political activity, and it's also a peaceful protest. So when you have, and as you know, they asked if they could be. You know, a number of, and to me, they look like they all have, pretty much all have masks on. But, you know, you have an exclusion in the law. It says peaceful protest or political activity, right? In fact, specifically, yeah, it says exactly political activity or peaceful protest. And you could call it political activity, but I'd call it peaceful protest because they heard you were coming up. And they know the news is fake. They understand it better than anybody. And they asked whether or not they can be here. Like the question about Russia, he doesn't mention Iran was in the report. He doesn't mention, or he mentions very late that China was in the report, because that's the way they are. They're not. If the press in this country were honest, it wasn't corrupt, if it wasn't fake, our country would be so much further ahead. But we're doing really great. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much.
And he goes off stage there. That was the Friday news conference. At the Saturday news conference, he signed those so-called executive orders, though, as I mentioned before, only one of them is an executive order. I put a link down in the video description to the White House page for presidential actions, where you'll see, at least at the moment, the top 4 actions here. These are the 4 so-called executive orders he signed. You'll see number 1, number 2, and number 4 are memoranda, not even executive orders. And so I'm about to show you news summaries talking about the so-called executive orders. Every time you hear the words executive orders, you know someone has made a journalistic error just based on this evidence I just showed you, that there was 1 executive order and 3 memoranda. And that's the thing that most of the coverage is about, whether, you know, it's unconstitutional and it's a violation. If you have your ACLU Constitution or any copy of the Constitution, this is the ACLU Constitution I'm currently sending out to people who sign up on Patreon or down at the link in the video description if they become $10 a month contributors, or if you just send me a $10 a month contribution on PayPal at the link in the video description, you'll get this Constitution and this sticker. And if you read Article 1, Section 8 of this Constitution, you'll see that only the Congress has the power to tax and to spend, to appropriate. And Trump's orders purportedly violate the constitutional prerogatives of Congress. And you'll see that covered a lot in the news summaries I'm about to show you. But what they don't point out is Trump's not really hardly doing anything. There's very little coverage of the fact that these executive orders, even though there's only 1 order and 3 memoranda, they don't really do, he's pretending to be a dictator doing all this stuff, but if you actually read the full text of the orders at the link down in the video description, you'll find that he's not really doing that much. And anyway, I'll talk about that more after we go through some of the news summaries. I'm going to start with the longest and, as usual, the best in a lot of ways, especially in terms of looking at the way Trump is a failed deal maker. I talked about in my topic how he's the so-called author of The Art of the Deal, which Chuck Todd mentions in his Meet the Press pre-recorded news summary package here. But he didn't really make a deal, did he? I'm going to show you news summaries from all 5 of the big 5 corporate outlets. The first 4 all talk about how we've gotten to 5 million COVID cases, over 160,000 deaths. That's not something that comes up in the Fox News summary. Comes up in all 4 of the other big 5 corporate news outlet summaries, starting with Chuck Todd giving his news summary, a live intro, and then a pre-recorded package that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good Sunday morning. It's easy, even dangerous, to become numb to the scope of the coronavirus tragedy that's all around us. Yesterday, the United States had a total of 5 million cases. That is 2 million more than Brazil, which is second in the world in cases. We've also passed 160,000 deaths. We're at 163,828 this morning. And the University of Washington's model projects the toll could roughly double to 300,000 by the 1st of December. But let's put that 160,000 figure into a little bit of perspective. That's about 40% more than the total number of Americans killed in World War I. It is nearly triple the number of Americans killed from Vietnam. And if that University of Washington figure is correct, by December we will have passed the number of U.S. battle deaths from World War II, all in less than 1 calendar year. Here's another perspective. Over the past 2 weeks, we've suffered roughly 1 death from COVID-19 every 77 seconds. President Trump continues to insist, as he put it, it'll go away like things go away. And when pressed in an interview recently, Mr. Trump added, they are dying, that's true, it is what it is. Yes, it is what it is. And what it is a once-in-a-century health crisis made worse by partisan politics, testing mistakes, evolving advice, a public too quick to ignore safety guidelines, and a president who has chosen to deny, dismiss, and distract for far too long. Adding to that, Washington seems more paralyzed than usual, deadlocked on a relief package, prompting President Trump, who himself has refused to meet with the negotiators personally, to step in late yesterday and attempt to sidestep Congress.
I'm taking executive action. We've had it.
President Trump signing a series of executive orders after his own negotiators failed to make a deal.
It was a disappointing meeting.
This morning was a disappointing. I don't care what rose they try to pin on it. It's got a lot of thorns.
We did not make any progress today.
But with a nation in crisis,
what's at stake for my family is being able to stay who we are, being able to maintain the life that we have.
The limited actions are likely to be challenged in court as President Trump takes on powers constitutionally granted to Congress.
Maybe they'll bring legal actions, maybe they won't, but they won't win.
30 million Americans are set to miss another benefits check this week. An eviction moratorium expired last month for millions more. The Small Business Paycheck Protection Program lapsed on Saturday, and some student loan relief will expire at the end of September. President Trump's action sets a weekly unemployment benefit at $400.
Why did you decide on $400 when previously families were receiving $600?
Yeah.
That will be a hardship for many. What do you say to them?
Well, no, it's not a hardship. This is the money that they need. This is the money they want, and this gives them a great incentive to go back to work.
The president says states, many of which are dealing with budget gaps and pleading for more federal support, must contribute 25% in order for Americans to qualify.
Which governors have told you that they would sign on?
Well, if they don't, they don't. That's up to them.
Among the other new orders, deferring the payroll tax for workers earning less than $100,000 a year, a move opposed by many congressional Democrats and Republicans, suggesting federal agencies consider some eviction protections and deferring student loan payments. The Constitution does not give the president power to either appropriate or tax without Congress. President Trump once promised to be a deal maker.
I'm different than other presidents. I'm a deal maker. I do hundreds of deals. The deals come out of my ears. I do deals. I mean, you have to do deals. We don't want to do the executive orders all the time. It wasn't supposed to be about executive orders. You have to bring them like Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. You have to bring them together.
But now a deal is elusive, with the two sides trillions of dollars apart on a wider package, which Democrats say should include money for schools reopening, for virus testing, and aid to cities and states.
I said, come back when you're ready to give a higher number.
At his golf club this weekend, the president spun the facts, both on the economy. For 20 straight weeks, unemployment claims have topped 1 million, shattering historical records.
The single greatest 3-month period of job creation in American history.
And on the virus.
A pandemic, which is disappearing. It's going to disappear.
And joining me now is Peter Navarro. He is the Director of Trade and Manufacturing.
And Peter Navarro is one of the Trump minions who I will show later in clip number 12, saying some fairly ridiculous things about Nancy Pelosi and the Founding Fathers and executive orders. but you're going to have to wait for that one. But like I usually say, I think NBC News Meet the Press had the best news summary because it was most detailed. It was the longest. It was like 4.5 minutes there, and it focused on that point that I made in my topic description about how Trump is supposedly a deal maker. He wrote The Art of the Deal, and he made all those comments about, oh, it's so easy, if I were president, it would be so easy to make these deals. I'd make these deals. And right now, many Americans are suffering because didn't make the deals. The art of the deal is very inartful from our current president, I guess I would say. But the next longest news summary, I actually have the news summaries from the real journalistic outlets, NBC, CBS, CNN, and ABC. I put it from the longest to the shortest. Then I'll get to the Fox News summary, which, like I said, doesn't mention the 5 million COVID cases or the 160,000 plus COVID deaths in the United States, which is mentioned in all the rest of these news summaries. And CBS News' Face the Nation points out something that you don't see on any of the other ones, where we're actually decreasing our testing. Remember when Trump got in trouble, I think it was at his Tulsa rally, where he said, slow down the testing because, more testing means more cases. And apparently we're slowing down our testing, which Margaret Brennan points out in her introduction to the news summary that then goes to Mark Strassman, who is always in Atlanta I pointed out a few weeks ago, Margaret Brennan says he's in Atlanta because every week he's like knocking on the door of the Center for Disease Control, for the Center for Diseases Control in Atlanta, and asking for an interview, and he never gets it. That's why he's hanging out in Atlanta. But he also really talks about the eviction crisis. That's really important, the eviction crisis that's about to befall the United States because of the lack of our art of the deal maker not being able to make a deal. So anyway, watch out for, I think I've already pre-criticized this clip in terms of Margaret Brennan doing a good job talking about the lack of testing, the decrease in the amount of testing, and then Mark Strassman on eviction, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We're in the middle of a recession and on the doorstep of an election. And millions of out-of-work Americans have just had their unemployment benefits slashed. Congress and the White House have the power to provide the needed help. But this morning, the country's top leaders are nowhere closer to a deal on the next coronavirus aid package. Nationwide, the number of infections is decreasing, but so is testing. For the first time since early March, the number of people tested for the virus declined. And as cases drop in some areas, they increase in others. Our coverage begins with CBS News national correspondent Mark Strassman in Atlanta.
Eviction day near Houston for Lisa Predilla and her daughter Ayani.
This is beyond Ayani and I now. This isn't about us anymore. This has surpassed us.
An eviction crisis looms. COVID's next catastrophic ripple. Over the next few months, as many as 40 million renters could be forced to move. The jobless have lost a lifeline. No more extra $600 a week from Washington.
They lose their jobs and they're not able to work. Their ability to pay their bills goes away pretty quick.
New COVID cases keep rising quickly in 11 states. Major cities from Portland to Kansas City to Boston all face new warnings from the White House. COVID America can feel balkanized. New York City has checkpoints at major bridges and tunnels. Visitors from 34 states either quarantine for 2 weeks or face fines up to $10,000.
It also will spread the word to all New Yorkers and all visitors that this is really, really serious.
In COVID-hot Florida, this gym owner was arrested for the third time. He refuses to make customers working out wear masks. Chicago's enforcing a mask mandate. up to $2,500 fines for businesses that ignore it.
This is a make or break moment for the state of Illinois.
Health experts agree more testing and faster results would help. But nationally, testing dropped by roughly 500,000 in the last week. One big reason, the backlog in testing labs. And common sense is always the wild card. This is Sturgis, South Dakota, a bike jamboree for up to 250,000 people. More Harleys than masks at one of the biggest public gatherings since America's contagion began. After a week when 7,000 Americans died from COVID, some good news. The CDC now predicts that deaths from the virus will actually decrease over the next 4 weeks. But for that to happen, we're all going to have to fight off another epidemic, COVID fatigue. Margaret?
Mark Strassman in Atlanta. Thank you. We go now to the White House and President Trump's national security advisor, Robert O'Brien.
And clip number 13 is Margaret Brennan's interview of Robert O'Brien, where she starts off so nice and then kind of stabs him in the back. Well, not really, but journalistically does a good job cross-examining him on the problems with testing, which is one of many problems, but not the worst of the problem. Well, who knows what the worst of the problems is. But like I said, I thought that was a good news summary. I pretty much pre-criticized it before I showed it. I talked about the focus on the eviction crisis that seems to be looming, that if Congress doesn't come up with a deal to give people money and to get a moratorium on evictions, things are going to get really bad for people. And this next clip is the final actual news summary. Before I get to that, I talked about my patrons on Patreon, and I talked about giving me contributions on PayPal, but I also wanted to thank my... why is this? I can never... I'm trying to show... Oh, there it goes. My Super Chat contributors so far. Here you go. So, thanks, Sexy Bob. I saw gave me that contribution before the show even started. And then Sinful Solutions, Yosemites contribution. Matthew, We'll Do It Live, gave me a $19.99 contribution. And thank you to Lulu Girl. That is another way that I continue to get YouTube revenue, despite the fact that YouTube doesn't monetize my videos till after pretty much everyone has watched them most of the time. But anyway, I wanted to thank those Super Chat contributors before I get to the last actual journalistic news summary. This is the shortest one from CNN's State of the Union. Dana Bash, our State of the Union this week. At first I thought it was Dazed and Confused. I don't know, maybe I have too much Led Zeppelin on the brain, but no, it's not Dazed and Confused. Dana Bash is in, substituting for Jake Tapper, but still telling us what the State of the Union this week is, and it's Confused and Angry, talking about the 5 million Americans who are COVID positive, the 162,000 who are dead, talking about the problems with schools, unemployment insurance, and of course talking about Trump going on a golf weekend in the middle of all of it. This is the shortest journalistic news summary, under 90 seconds, from CNN's State of the Union this morning. Over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in for Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is confused and angry. It is difficult even to fathom the number of Americans suffering from the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. Nearly 5 million of them have now tested positive for the virus, and 162,000 are dead. More than 7 million students are starting the school year with online learning only, and more than 16 million Americans are unemployed. And after 2 weeks of negotiating, congressional Democrats in the White House could not reach any agreement to help those American families who were struggling just to put food on the table. At this point, lawmakers have no plans for further talks. President Trump, who did not attend those negotiations and spent a long weekend at his golf resort in New Jersey, said yesterday that he would bypass Congress to sign executive actions addressing pandemic relief, including asking the federal government to consider halting evictions, deferring student loan payments, reallocating money so that governors could partially replace the extra federal unemployment benefit that expired last month, and temporarily suspending the payroll tax. But already there are lots of questions about how effective those actions will be and whether or not they're even legal. Last night, one Republican senator criticized the president for ignoring Congress's role with, quote, unconstitutional slop. Joining me now is top White House.
That was Larry Kudlow. Dana Bash does a great job of cross-examining Larry Kudlow. I'm going to show you, that's clip number 11. And Dana Bash, I think, totally recognizes that the 4 so-called executive orders are actually, there's only one that's even an executive order at all. The rest are memoranda, and they don't do very much. And she does a good job cross-examining Larry Kudlow on that issue. And I'm going to show you part of it, not the entire interview. But before I get to any of the newsmaker interviews, both where I get to Nancy Pelosi eviscerating, and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer eviscerating these so-called Trump executive orders, and then Trump's minions not really being able to defend them. I want to show you the Fox News Sunday news summary, which, wait, no, I'm sorry. Before I get to that, I have to show you the shortest actual journalistic news summary. This is ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where George Stephanopoulos does just a 50-second news summary, but still mentions the 5 million U.S. COVID-19 cases, the 162,000 dead, which doesn't make it into the Fox News Sunday news summary. So I'll show you. I will show you ABC News's This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary, where they also talk about the country club, but executive orders, which is not exactly true. And anyway, let's watch it and then talk about it over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. As we come on the air this morning, the number of COVID cases here in the U.S. is crossing 5 million, more than any other country in the world. And the millions of Americans who've lost their jobs during the pandemic are facing a new week without extended benefits after the collapse of talks between the White House and Congress. Late yesterday, President Trump announced that he would take action on his own, signing a series of documents that he claimed would address the crisis facing workers, renters, and the unemployed. And to cheers from members of his country club at Bedminster, New Jersey, he laid the blame for failed talks on Democrats in Congress.
Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have chosen to hold this vital assistance hostage on behalf of very extreme partisan demands.
And we are joined now by the Senate Democratic leader, Chuck Schumer. Senator Schumer, thank you for joining us.
And I'll show you Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer in just a few minutes. But first, I want to show you the Fox News Sunday news summary that I mistakenly introduced before that. I thought I almost missed a clip, but I didn't miss it. And this is the clip I started introducing, where I talked about how this is the one non-journalistic clip, even though Chris Wallace sometimes commits journalism. If you read this book over here, The Loudest Voice in the Room by Gabriel Sherman, as I say pretty much every week, you will find out that Fox News was actually created as a propaganda arm of the Republican Party, not as a news organization at all. That's why I spent all those years coming up with over 200 examples of Fox News bias, and then I thought my work was pretty much done, but I think you'll see it again in this next clip, Fox News bias. No mention of what you saw in the previous 4 news summaries of the 5 million Americans who have gotten coronavirus, of the 162,000 who have died, doesn't show up here. And in fact, you'll see Chris Wallace start off saying that Trump made good on his threat to do executive orders, and they make it sound like he's really doing something, which, as I've mentioned multiple times, if you read the actual text of his orders, there's only one order, the other three are memoranda, and they don't really do anything. And then he goes to Mark Meredith, who also talks about the wide-ranging executive actions. I think I pretty much criticized the Fox News Sunday news summary that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. Well, President Trump made good on his threat to take executive action in the face of a stalemate over coronavirus relief between Democrats and his negotiators on Capitol Hill. He signed executive orders yesterday to extend unemployment benefits, but at a lower level, to continue a moratorium on evictions, to provide relief for student loans, and to suspend payroll taxes. But the moves could prompt a court fight by Democrats. In a moment, we'll discuss what happens now with House Speaker Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Mnuchin. But first, let's bring in Mark Meredith, traveling with the president in New Jersey, with a closer look at the executive action. Mark.
Chris, President Trump is taking a wide range of executive actions to address the economic crisis. And while some Republicans are starting to cheer these moves, Democrats insist this will do little to help Americans that are struggling to make ends meet.
At his New Jersey golf club, President Trump signed executive actions to boost the economy while accusing Democrats of stonewalling stimulus negotiations.
Democrats have obstructed people from getting desperately needed money.
The president's ordering the government to help protect people from being evicted and defaulting on student loans. He's also temporarily suspending collection of the payroll tax for some workers and diverting money from FEMA's disaster relief fund to restart enhanced federal unemployment insurance.
I'm taking action to provide an additional or an extra $400 per week.
But the federal government will only pay part of the tab. States will be required to pay 25% or $100 on top of state benefits per unemployed worker per week. Democrats dismissed the actions as meager and reiterated calls for the president to send his staff back to Capitol Hill to negotiate.
Meet us in the middle. God's sakes, please, for the sake of America, meet us in the middle.
Thank you very much.
The president admits lawsuits could delay his orders from going into effect, but he says he felt he had no choice but to act.
The latest jobs numbers also give us an idea of where things stand with the economy going into the November election. Last month, employers created more jobs, but it was a noticeable slowdown from the month prior. Chris?
Mark Meredith reporting from Bridgewater, New Jersey. Mark, thank you. And joining us now,
And joining them now is Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi. Actually, that's the next clip I'm going to show you. I think I pretty much pre-criticized that clip before I showed it to you about how that was more Republican propaganda than journalism. I watched that multiple times. Did you hear anything about the 5 million COVID-19 cases and the 162,000 deaths? Chuck Todd in the first news summary I showed you, I think, did a okay job of trying to unnumb Americans. We've gotten almost numb to the fact that that somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 Americans are dying every day, but apparently that's not even news on Fox News Sunday anymore, at least according to their news summary. Am I the only one who finds that totally unacceptable in terms of journalism? I mean, what is going on over there? But I guess we're getting close to the election, and that's the only... I talked about how the Gabriel Sherman book, The Loudest Voice in the Room over here, says that Fox News was created to be a propaganda arm of the Republican Party, and really the only question is, does that mean that they are Trump TV or Republican TV, and are the Republicans actually going to start splitting from Trump if this battleground map turns out to be true, where Biden is starting off with 334 votes in the Electoral College and might win Texas? If that's true, does that mean Fox News is going to start moving to be a post-Trump Republican propaganda outlet and splitting away from Trump? I don't know. That's something that will be interesting to see in the next few months. But like I said, the next news clip is actually Nancy Pelosi on Fox News Sunday, where I think she did a good job of pretty much eviscerating all of the Republican talking points in terms of how Trump has taken executive action, which he hasn't, in terms of, well, I don't want to totally pre-criticize all the clips. Maybe I'll save a little criticism till after the clip, or political commentary. Let's watch Nancy Pelosi talking to Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday this morning. The one part that I will pre-criticize is what you'll see at the end. You know how I keep talking about how Trump is supposed to be this great art of the deal maker? That never showed up on Fox News Sunday, but they criticized Nancy Pelosi for not being a great deal maker at the end of this clip that I will talk about with you. I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
President Trump says while you and congressional Democrats were pushing your agenda, he acted yesterday to help people in need. Take a look.
Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have chosen to hold this vital assistance hostage on behalf of very extreme partisan demands, and the radical left Democrats said we just can't do that.
However it came about, and I know you don't like the executive action, won't millions of Americans now get some extended federal unemployment relief and some protection from evictions? Get that now rather than getting nothing at all?
No. In fact, what the president did is, I agree with the Republican senator said, it was unconstitutional slop. While it has the illusion of saying we're going to have a moratorium on evictions, it says, I'm going to ask you, the folks in charge to study if that's feasible. While he says he's going to do the payroll tax, what he's doing is undermining Social Security and Medicare. So these are illusions, and they really do not, what he calls in our bill, unnecessary. Let's just review the difference. First of all, millions of children in our country are food insecure. Our bill addresses that with tens of billions of dollars. Feed the children. The Republican bill has $250,000. While our bill addresses those who are on the brink of eviction, we use the numbers from the Princeton Eviction Lab and the Low-Income Housing Coalition to show how many people will be evicted and what their needs are, and that could come to tens of billions of dollars. The Republican bill has nothing. This being a Sunday morning, I just recall a prayer that says, pray for those who are hungry, pray harder for those who will not feed them, pray for those who are homeless, pray harder for those who will not give them shelter. Pray for those who are sick and lonely. Pray harder for those who will not give them comfort. But what the president did does not address schools, all of the issues that are contained in the legislation. We can go through that, but you said give short answers.
But Speaker, I understand that the president's executive action doesn't do all the things you want, but having no bill at all, not coming to any agreement, wasn't going to provide any of the things that you want either. You're known as a master negotiator, but didn't you mess this one up? Because you talk about all the things that the president's bill, let me just finish if I may, Speaker. Now, because there's no deal at all, cities and states won't get any money. There's no money for the post office. There's no money for hospitals. There's no money for state boards of election. You knew that the president was threatening to take this executive action. I understand that you weren't going to get everything you wanted and didn't get everything you wanted, but should you have cut a deal? And are you ready to go back into talks to try to come up with a fuller package?
Well, clearly you don't have an understanding of what is happening here, both in the weakness of the president's executive orders, which don't give the money enhanced benefit, but puts a complicated formula there, which will take a while, if at all, to accomplish, to put money in the pockets of the American people. What we have said, we're going to honor our heroes, state and local, healthcare workers, et cetera, first responders, teachers, and the rest. And that's part of our argument, is how much are they willing to do. Secondly, we're going to stop the, we're going to stop, no, if I allowed you to finish, you allow me to finish. They're going to, let's open our economy by addressing the virus, which the president has ignored for months now, to do the right thing, scientifically based. And third, let's put money in the pockets of the American people. So what the president did doesn't even accomplish what he sets out to do in the categories he did. But we said to them, we'll come down $1 trillion, you go up $1 trillion. Meet us halfway, and we'll be able to have an agreement that meets the needs of the American people. Excuse me.
She almost sounds like she has a dry cough there at the end, which is not very good in these times of COVID-19 when a dry cough is one of the major symptoms. But hopefully she's just been talking too much, because she was on 2 different shows. I'm actually going to show you a clip of Nancy Pelosi talking to Dana Bash on CNN's State of the Union as the final clip, talking about Russian interference versus China and Iran, their preferences in the election versus Russia actual interference. That's clip number 14. But I think Nancy Pelosi did a good job there of puncturing the Trump talking points about his executive actions that were, paltry, that were mostly meaningless. Like I said, if you look at the actual text of the orders at the link I put down in the video description, there's actually only one of them that's an executive order. The other 3 are memorandum. They Trump is trying to make them look like they're dictatorship of the executive, but actually they don't really do that much. And one good thing that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer both point out is the payroll tax cut. Well, the payroll tax is what we use to pay for Social Security and Medicare. So you cut that, and that fund is in big trouble. That's one thing Nancy Pelosi pointed out in her talking points, and you'll hear that from Chuck Schumer, although he does one thing that kind of disturbed me a little. He says that Trump's executive orders, so-called executive actions, whatever you want to call them, that they're paltry. And then he says that he can give you 3 words to describe them, and they're like weak, unworkable, and then he says far too narrow. And that's not 3 words, that's 5 words. It almost made me think that, maybe, because, being able to remember 5 words, that's like the person, woman, man, camera, TV, cognitive assessment that Trump was so excited about 2 weeks ago. So does that mean Chuck Schumer thinks 3 words or 5 words? Or anyway, that it was most of what Chuck Schumer says here I think is really good, but am I right that he thinks 5 words or 3 words? You can let me know what you think after we watch Chuck Schumer responding to George Stephanopoulos, giving basically the same talking points you heard from Nancy Pelosi, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Let's talk about the president's proposals. First of all, Trump wants to replace the $600 unemployment benefit, the federal benefit, with a $300 federal benefit paid for disaster relief funds. He says the states will kick in another $100. Does he have the power to do that? Will you go to court to stop him?
Well, let me first say, George, that overall we have this huge crisis, the largest economic crisis since the Depression, the greatest health crisis since the pandemic. And unfortunately, the president's executive orders described in 1 word could be paltry, in 3 words, unworkable, weak, and far too narrow. The event at the country club is just what Trump does, a big show, but it doesn't do anything. And as the American people look at these executive orders, they'll see they don't come close to doing the job in two ways. One, what they proposed, and second, what's left out. What's proposed. On the unemployment benefit, first, the $600 a week has been very successful. It's kept millions of people out of poverty. It's pumped more money into the economy. Consumer spending is probably the best thing going in the economy.
The president says it keeps people from working.
They want to cut it. The evidence shows that's not the case. That belittles the American people. Americans want to work, but with 10, 11% unemployment, you can't find the job, and people shouldn't be given a pay cut. But second, this is an unworkable plan. Most states will take months to implement it because it's brand new. It's sort of put together with spit and paste. And many states, because they have to chip in $100 and they don't have money, won't do it. And to boot, it depletes the Hurricane Trust Fund to defer this money, to pay for this money at a time when we're at the height of hurricane season.
Well, can the president do that, though? Is it legal? Is it legal?
Well, you know, I'll leave that up to the attorneys. It doesn't do the job. It's not going to go into effect in most places because for weeks or months, because it's so put together in a crazy way. If he just would have renewed the $600 as we do in the Heroes Bill through January, things would flow smoothly.
How about the payroll tax deferral?
The payroll tax cut is it's just way off base. First, most employers are not going, it's a deferral, and so it accumulates till January when it expires. Employers are just going to continue to withhold the money. I've talked to some because they don't want their employees to be stuck with a huge bill in December, so it's not going to pump money into the economy. And second, the president said if elected, I will forgive all this. That depletes money out of the Social Security and Medicare trust funds. If you're a Social Security recipient, a Medicare recipient, you better watch out if President Trump is reelected.
So I think Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer in those last two clips pretty much eviscerated the so-called executive orders, only one of which was an order, as I keep saying over and over again, in terms of what Trump is doing and the whole Republican position. And you saw at the end there what I pointed out that Nancy Pelosi also talked about in terms of the payroll tax cut being a hit to Social Security. And that's something that Chris Wallace asked the Secretary of the Treasury about, Steve Mnuchin, and his answers were not really very reassuring. He was saying, because the payroll tax is what funds the whole Social Security and Medicare system. And so if you cut that tax, where are you going to get the money? And he says the general fund, but of course we're running huge deficits. There's no extra money. So I guess he's saying it's being added to the deficit or increase in taxes, or you don't really get an answer from Steve Mnuchin in this Fox News Sunday clip that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch this. This is the first of the 4 Trump minions being unable to respond to what you just saw from Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. It's Steve Mnuchin, Larry Kudlow, Peter Navarro, and Robert O'Brien. And here's Steve Mnuchin, and I'll talk about that with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
I want to pick up on what you just said, that if the president's reelected, he would like to cut the payroll tax. The payroll tax is what finances Social Security. The payroll tax is what finances Medicare. Democrats are now saying if President Trump is reelected, he's going to gut those programs because he's going to gut the tax that pays for them.
Chris, that's not the case. There would be an automatic contribution from the general fund to those trust funds. The president in no way wants to harm those trust funds, so they'd be reimbursed just as they've always been in the past when we've done these types of things.
So you're saying that there'd be no payroll tax cut, there'd be an income tax What, increase? Because we're already running huge deficits, so how are you going to pay for it from the general fund?
Chris, there's a payroll tax cut, which is like any other tax cut to hardworking Americans, and you just have a transfer from the general fund. So during fiscal times, we're focused on tax cuts, regulatory relief, direct payments to Americans. We'll deal with the budget deficit when we get the economy back to where it was before. Right now, we're focused on delivering very needed relief to American families that have been impacted by this terrible COVID economic issue.
I just to be clear here, though, the Democrats are saying the result of a payroll tax cut is it would mean a cut in benefits for Social Security and Medicare, to which you say,
that's just factually inaccurate. There'd be no reduction to those benefits, and the president's made that very clear. But the issue here is, let's pass legislation on things that we agree on. Let's not hold up money to education for kids getting back to school safely. Let's not hold up money to state and local governments where they need it. The Democrats have to come off of a ridiculous $1 trillion number to state and local governments to bail out some of the states that were poorly managed.
Well, let me just ask briefly on that.
So, yeah, I don't think Steve Mnuchin really gave a clear answer to that question, so I guess Chris Wallace on Fox News did commit a little journalism, even though Fox News isn't really a news outlet, as I talked about earlier. But one of the things that makes his answer so bogus, he said, the money's just gonna, it's not gonna, the payroll tax funds Social Security and Medicare, but cutting the payroll tax won't hurt them because we'll just get money from the general fund. But remember what I said about the Constitution? This is the ACLU version of the U.S. Constitution. Read Article 1, Section 8, and you'll see Congress has the power to tax and to spend, not Steve Mnuchin, not the president. So that's something that would have to be passed through the Congress. And I don't know why Steve Mnuchin thinks that after the election that looks like it's going to go strongly against Donald Trump in terms of both the electoral votes for Biden and the Democrats taking the Senate, keeping the House. That's, if the election were held today, which I wish it was held today, but it isn't. It's still a little less than 3 months away. But that was number one of the Trump minions doing a really bad job of defending the Trump administration position on these negotiations. The next clip is Larry Kudlow, and I keep giving Dana Bash and Jake Tapper the clip of the week for their great cross-examinations of Trump administration officials. I think Dana Bash did a great job of pointing out all the flaws in these so-called executive orders, and even the fact that they aren't really executive orders, in her cross-examination of Larry Kudlow. If you want to see the whole thing, click on the State of the Union link down in the video description. Here she is talking about the unemployment benefit, where under the old bill that ran out about a week ago, people got the benefit that their state gave them, plus a $600 a week benefit from the federal government, which not only kept people being able to pay their rent and buy food, but it actually kept consumer spending up. It kept us from going into a really deep recession. Just, I think I mentioned that we were going to drop by 33%, and that was the annualized rate. It was actually 9.5% in the second quarter, but if you annualize it, it was 32.9%, like a 1/3 drop in the gross domestic product. And it would have been a lot worse if people weren't getting an extra $600 a week. And then what Trump did is he said, well, since Congress hasn't authorized that amount, the federal government is going to pay $300 of a $400 supplement to the state unemployment benefit, but only if states come up with the $100 of the $400. And here you'll see Larry Kudlow talking about that $400 benefit, but then he adds it to the average state benefit, which is like $300 or $400, trying to obfuscate everything. But I think Dan Abash does a good job of pointing out that he doesn't even know how many states are even going to participate in this program, as I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that Trump minion getting pummeled by CNN State of the Union anchor, substitute anchor, Dan Abash this morning over here.
I want to start with the president's claim that unemployed Americans will get $400 per week in unemployment assistance. But let's talk about what the executive action really says. Americans only get money if A, a governor asks for it, B, if the state kicks in $100 for each person each week. But many states, as you know, are really struggling to make ends meet. So let's be clear. No unemployed American is going to get an extra penny unless their governor asks for it and can afford it. Is that right?
Well, look, don't forget, please, the state unemployment benefits continue. There's no effect on what they do. And yes, you are correct. For an extra $100, we will lever it up. We'll pay 3/4, and the states will pay 25%. And I think the way this is going to work out, we have additional funds that we will repurpose for this. This is an essential item. We've tried to get it through the Democratic House for, 2 or 3 times. And it's going to be a form of economic assistance. Probably you'll get $800 total, federal and state. And if we get it going September 1st, which is what the deadline looks like, that probably give the workforce an increase in wages.
What do you mean
it's a wage increase after tax. $1,200. Well, at a minimum, we will put in $300, and the states will continue with their $400. But I think all they have to do is put up an extra $1, and we'll be able to throw in the extra $100. So it should be a total. It should be, may not be in every case, because as you know, we're talking averages. Some states higher, some states lower. But on average, Dana, it'll run to about $800. That's about $1,200 wage increase.
The executive action says $400 and that the state would pay 25% of this. You're talking about some other money that I don't know about.
Well, we will stand ready to repurpose if states put in a little bit more, is all amounts to. I mean, right now, that number's going to run around $700. I think they'll get to $800. Some states can get above $800 with our federal help. And again, the key point here is that it's a wage increase, Dana, of about $1,200 for the last 4 months of the year. That's a big pay hike. And not only does that reward the heroes who have been working, I think it's an incentive to get more people who want to come into the workforce.
But we need a bit of a reality check here. You do agree that the only way any of this could possibly happen is if the states actually ask for it and create a whole new system. And is that what your expectation is?
Well, look, that's like topping it off. State benefits, I mean, we're talking about averages here across the country, but state benefits run about $300-400. That's going to continue. We're not touching that. That's
right. We're not
up to the
talking about
states.
this. We're just talking about the enhanced unemployment benefit. Let's leave that out of this
That's
conversation.
Correct. So for $100 add on, we will put on $300.
What makes you think that states have that $100 a week per person who is unemployed in their state to even put into this potential pot of money?
Well, I think they'll be able to make room. Our estimates from the Treasury Department in terms of the CARES Act 1 was that the states have not spent all the money that was allocated to them, and that there's considerable overflow that they could make use of. We're going to operate on the same principle in the executive order. We will be repurposing funds from other areas. Based on our estimates, the states will be able to provide the extra $100, and that will gross up the whole benefit to something on average of about $800.
Have you checked with the states? How many of the 50 states and D.C. and other territories say that they are going to be able to pony up $100 a week per unemployed citizen?
Yeah, good question. We'll probably find that out, today and tomorrow as we make our canvas. We've been in touch with them. We have very good records coming out of the Treasury Department, but we will be in touch with them.
So you don't know. So you don't know yet. The president didn't know the answer to that before he made his announcement.
Well, look, at the moment, we know the money, probably a good $80 to $100 billion was not spent. So we think that's distributed across the 50 states should be ample. We'll find out the exact specifics today and tomorrow.
So that is ridiculous, where Larry Kudlow claims that because some money has not yet been spent by the states, that they have nothing to spend it on but this extra unemployment benefit, even though later in that program, I think they had Mike DeWine on, the Republican governor of Ohio, who wouldn't say even he would participate in this program where the state has to give $100 to get this $300 from the federal government to add to whatever the state gives for unemployment insurance per week, because he had already allocated that money for testing in the future, because there's such a problem with testing, and that's something that CBS News' Face the Nation pointed out in their news summary, and Margaret Brennan will point out again when I get to the fourth of the Trump minions. That was the second. I've shown you Steve Mnuchin, I've shown you Larry Kudlow, both failing to really defend the Trump administration, I think, in those last two clips, before I get to Robert O'Brien talking to Margaret Brennan about testing. The next one is, in some ways, the weirdest, maybe the most noteworthy of all the Trump minions, Peter Navarro, who I guess is trying to say the craziest thing of all the Trump minions who are on the Sunday shows. He says this weird thing, that this is him talking about how it's really the Democrats who won't make a deal, and it's Nancy Pelosi's fault for going out and talking to the news media with her scarves whipping around, or her scarf whipping, something about her scarf. I don't know why Peter Navarro is having such a problem with Nancy Pelosi's scarf, but Chuck Todd doesn't follow up on a lot of stuff that he says here. Like, he says something about how the executive orders were created by the Lord and the founding fathers to be like an antidote to bickering partisan Congresses, which is totally nonsensical, because there weren't even any political parties at the time the Constitution was formed. Actually, the political parties that were formed were the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. They were like formed based on different interpretations of the U.S. Constitution. This is also an ACLU Constitution, but this is the old version. The new version is fallen down. I don't want to go get it. But so Peter Navarro says all these weird things. Chuck Todd doesn't cross-examine him on that, but he does point out the one thing that Chuck Todd points out, that Trump is off golfing, and also points out something totally ridiculous Peter Navarro says at the very beginning here about how Democrats should compromise with Republicans in the White House. Like, they're asking for $3 trillion, we want $1 trillion, so we should come together on $2 trillion. Well, the Democrats have basically offered $2 trillion multiple times, and that's the one thing Chuck Todd cross-examines Peter Navarro on in this otherwise very ridiculous clip that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
It failed, but I mean, look, this should be easier than it is, Chuck. We've got two sides. One's at $1 trillion and others at $3 trillion. The first thing you have to do is agree on some number in between. Once you do that, step two is figure out within that what you both agree on, something like a $1,200 check to every American. And then what you do is you trade off, go back and forth across the table what you want, respecting each other's red lines. You don't make the Republicans play for Planned Parenthood or pot farms, for example. This should be easy. The question we've had watching this unfold, the question the president has, is whether the Democrats really are sincere when they come to the table. And I'm not sure. It doesn't help when Speaker Pelosi goes out after every day with her scarves flying and just beats the heck out of us for being cruel people, when in fact you have a president.
But Dr. Navarro,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, let me ask you this. Where is the president? Why was he at his golf club all weekend? Why isn't he negotiating? Look, I understand you guys don't like each other. That Nancy Pelosi and the president, well, where is he? Why isn't he involved?
Look, you have to understand, this is the hardest working president in history. He works 24/7. He can be in Bedminster, Mar-a-Lago, the Oval Office, or anywhere in between. He can be at the Whirlpool factory like we were in Thursday, celebrating working men and women benefiting from tariffs. He's working 24/7. The problem here is Capitol Hill, the swamp, the two houses that are too far apart. I mean, the Lord and the Founding Fathers created executive orders because of partisan bickering and divided government. That's what we have here. But the president's taking action. His constituency, let's be clear, his constituency is mainstream Republicans, blue-collar Democrats, and independents who are sick and tired of the swamp. And he reached out and he took action. He didn't have to sign those executive orders. He could have just let this keep going. He did not do that. He took action.
You outlined how a negotiation works, and you did something very interesting. You said, okay, the Democrats are at $3 trillion, the Republicans are at $1 trillion. You got to figure out where to meet in the middle. That's what the Democrats proposed. They said, hey, Chuck, let's meet in the middle on a number, Chuck, and it looks like Mark Meadows said no.
That's not accurate. And here's the thing: the cardinal rule in negotiations is you don't do them on TV. You don't do them here on TV. You don't do them on Capitol Hill in the rotunda like Nancy Pelosi does. You do it with sincerity. You have to have both sides willing to make a deal. I know a deal can be done if you just go by that rule. It can be done, but in the absence of this, the American people have to understand.
Let me ask you this.
President Trump will act to help people who are unemployed, who are hurting, people who are working that need more money, renters, homeowners who are really facing a bleak future of evictions and foreclosures, and students who need to get out from under that burden of debt.
Assuming negotiations
So, yeah, like I said, that was pretty ridiculous. Peter Navarro there with his claim first that it was the Democrats who weren't negotiating about, $3 trillion, $1 trillion, come to the middle, and that was the one thing that Chuck Todd actually cross-examined him on, not about the Nancy Pelosi and her flying scarf. I don't know what that was about. And also not that whole thing about how God and the Founding Fathers wanted to stop the bickering Congress, and that's why there are executive orders. That makes no sense. But at least Chuck Todd got the whole question about who was not negotiating. And anyway, I thought that whole Peter Navarro clip was weird, but the final Trump minion I want to show you before I get to the last news clip where Nancy Pelosi talks about Russian and Chinese and Iranian interference in our election. But this next clip is actually, I really appreciate this kind of cross-examination you see from Margaret Brennan. She starts off really soft with Trump's national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, who tested positive for COVID-19 and I guess had some symptoms and a bout with the disease based on his answer here. But she starts off saying, how are you feeling about, having tested positive for COVID and, gotten this treatment? And he answers and, gives blessings and thanks to all the people who helped him. And then she comes in with, wouldn't it be nice if all Americans could get the elite medical care you got and the immediate testing you got? We need 5 million tests a day. When are we going to get 5? It's kind of like stealth cross-examination. It's, you butter up the cross-examination subject, make it sound like you're, being really empathetic and ally of your interview subject, and then stab him in the back with the questioning, I guess. Well, you let me know what you think after we watch that final Trump minion, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, being interviewed by Margaret Brennan on CBS News' Face the Nation this morning over here.
We go now to the White House and President Trump's National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien. This is his first interview since recovering from coronavirus. Good morning to you, Ambassador. We have just hit 5 million cases in this country. You were a lucky one. You recovered. How are you feeling, and do you have after effects?
Well, it's always great to be back on your show, Margaret, but it's especially good to be back now. And look, I've recovered fully, and I'm very, very grateful. I was blessed and had a light case. I want to thank the White House medical team and Dr. Sean Conley for their great care while I suffered through this virus. And I also want to thank my colleagues, from the president, the vice president, everyone down, who was so supportive of me personally. And I hope that anyone else who's suffering from coronavirus, who's away from work, who's quarantined, has the same level of support from their colleagues at their office as I did from mine. So, it's great to be back, and I've been very blessed. But this is a tough thing. It's a nasty virus, and it's done great damage to our country. And my heart goes out to the folks who didn't make it. I was fortunate, but there are a lot of people who didn't make it, and there are a lot of people who are suffering greatly as a result of this virus, and having been through this, my heart really goes out to them.
Well, not all Americans receive the kind of elite care that you were able to, unless you work in Major League Baseball or at the White House, you don't have access to regular asymptomatic testing. That's just not where we are as a country. How long before the average American can get that?
Well, we're working on testing, and I think what's happened with testing in America is really a miracle. I mean, there's no country in the world that comes close to what America is doing on testing. But we're working on getting more testing out there, and our great American companies are coming up with faster tests, more mobile tests, and we need to get testing out there. But it's not just
We were
testing.
supposed to be at 5 million tests a day at this point. We're not nearly that. In fact, we're now at 5 million infections as a country.
Well, we've had a lot of infections as a country, and again, this is something we need to keep in mind. I mean, this came out of China, and we've been fighting it ever since. The whole world's been fighting it, and there have been hundreds of thousands, or maybe over 1 million people worldwide who've been killed as a result of this virus. And we've got to remember where it came from, but we're going to fight like heck. We're working hard on vaccines. We're working hard on testing machines that are portable and fast, so that people around the country can be tested quickly. We're working on therapeutics. I mean, I'm so impressed with our scientists and our doctors and our first responders and the folks who are attacking this disease, and God bless them all.
God bless them, everyone. All of a sudden, Robert O'Brien is Tiny Tim. No, he actually got a little Trumpian there at the end. Just like when anyone from the Trump administration is cornered, they're like immediate or last resort is, well, the virus came from China. You saw Robert O'Brien talking about that when Margaret Brennan, like I said, did this great stealth job of cross-examining him. First, making him feel comfortable about how he's a, COVID-19 survivor, and how did that go? And then how about everybody getting all the elite medical care and testing you got? And I thought that was a great clip, as I said before I showed it. But anyway, the last clip, I'm going to show you the last news clip for, I have a bonus Dash and Sandy clip, a dandy clip for those who are Dash and Sandy fans out there. You know, Dash is the cat, Sandy is the dog. They will both, oh, and I don't know where Dash is, but Sandy is right over there whining. I don't know if you just heard that whining, but maybe it was because I mentioned her name. But I will have a Dash and Sandy clip after this final news clip where this is what I talked about when I showed that ReidOut, the ReidOut, MSNBC, the new show with Joy and Reid, where they were talking about Russian interference in our election. Well, Trump's director of national intelligence put out this report saying that the Russians are actively interfering in the 2020 election with a preference for Donald Trump. But to make it not sound so bad, they added in, well, China and Iran have a preference for Biden, though they're not doing all of the things that Russia is doing, which you'll see Nancy Pelosi point out in great detail talking to Dana Bash on the final news clip tonight from CNN's State of the Union this morning over here.
I really want to ask you about something different, but it's so important, and that is the security of American elections. A top elections official in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence revealed on Friday that Russia is using a range of measures to primarily denigrate former Vice President Joe Biden, while both China and Iran don't want President Trump to win re-election. You suggested in a statement that the threats posed by these three countries are not equal. Can you tell us more about that, please?
They're not equivalent, and that's why Leader Schumer, Chairman Schiff, and I don't know what they call him in the Senate. I think it's Vice Chair of the Intelligence Committee, Warner, has sent a letter to them saying the American people need to know what Russia is doing to interfere in this election.
What can you tell us as somebody who's privy to that intelligence?
Well, we can tell more than what the intelligence community put forth. They responded positively. They put more information out there, but there's more that needs to be put out there. No sources and methods. Nobody understands it better than us.
Can you lean into it a little bit more for the sake of voters wondering what's going on?
Well, I can't divulge information that is classified. That's why we want them to do it. But I will say this. That for some reason they have tried to have some equivalence. I take second place to no one on my criticism of China for over 30 years. I said to my staff the other day, they say I'm the most unliked American and disliked American in China. They said, no, they don't say that. They say you're the most hated American in China because of their human rights violations, their trade policy, their proliferation of weapons and that. But so I have take no criticism for saying this. But the Chinese, what they said is China would prefer Joe Biden. Whether they do, that's their conclusion, that they would prefer Joe Biden. Russia is actively 24/7 interfering in our election. They did so in 2016, and they are doing so now. And they say that to a certain extent, but they need to tell the American people more. The American people, I believe, think they should decide who the President of the United States is, not Vladimir Putin making that decision for us.
Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, I really appreciate you coming on this morning.
So, like I said before I showed the clip, that's basically what even Trump's Director of National Intelligence, as Nancy Pelosi pointed out there, is saying that Russia is actively trying to interfere in our elections with the intent of helping Donald Trump, while China and Iran have a preference for Joe Biden, apparently, but they're expressing it through things like public opinion articles, or it's not the kind of things that Russia did in 2016 and apparently is still doing in 2020. That's one of the unanswered questions that I guess I will be covering in upcoming LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundups. Thank you for joining me this week. I appreciate all of the live viewers, all the comments I get during the week from the recorded show viewers, and for the Dash and Sandy fans out there, the Dandy fans, this clip is for the real political junkies out there. If you, like me, if you watched Aaron Sorkin's show, The West Wing, that was a real political junkie show. And one of the things actually I made a video on my YouTube channel about Aaron Sorkin's show, Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. That was another great Aaron Sorkin show. But one of the things Aaron Sorkin is famous for is his walk and talk hallway shots, that he always has his characters talking to each other while walking down a hallway. Well, there's not a lot of talking going on in this Dash and Sandy Dandy clip, but you will see, I guess this is like a walk and sniff. This is sort of like a West Wing hallway walk and sniff clip with Dash and Sandy tonight over here. So what do you think? That's my Dash and Sandy clip that I took earlier today. I think you saw my Apple time capsule in the background there. That's what I'm using to get the Wi-Fi into my laptop here to do this live stream broadcast to you that I've been doing for 381 Sundays. I appreciate all of you who are supporting me by showing up as live viewers, recorded show viewers, giving me supportive comments, and of course the financial contributions through Patreon and PayPal down in the video description, clicking on that join button, and of course all the super chat contributors, including I did a little bit of Googling while I was watching clips, trying to figure out that DJ Turtle lyrics question. Never quite got it, but so I got a super chat contribution from Kettle, another one from Sinful Solutions there. So and Sinful Solutions watching from Thailand. That was another one of the Trump gaffes that's going to be totally an antidote for the Biden gaffes, one would hope, but who knows. But anyway, I will be back next Sunday. Next Sunday, I'm not going to be doing the show from home. My daughter is going off to her second year of college, not remote learning, because she's a marine biology major and she has her marine biology lab class this year at her college that's near the ocean. So that's the one class that's not remote, and you can't really do a marine biology lab remotely, I guess. Or anyway, so next week I won't be at home. I will be taking my daughter to college, and so there may be technical difficulties. Who knows? I'm going to be at basically an unknown Airbnb with supposedly has good internet access, and anyway, we'll find out what happens. I can't just bear with me. I'm going to do my best to do the show next week like I have done for the last 7+ years, 381 Sundays. But until next week, I guess I will be seeing all of you around. DJ Turtle gave me a walk and sniff contribution there. Why can't I get to the part of this that's... until next week, I guess I will be... Why can't I scroll on the... I can't even get to my... Until next week, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.